So to introduce our speakers, I appreciate that they've joined us. Things in the economy have gone topsy-turvy, as we all know, and they're here to help us understand where we are coming from, where we are now, and just help us make sense of everything that's going on in the economy right now. So we are joined with Amy Vander Vliet and Scott Bailey. Amy is a regional economist with the state of Oregon. She covers Clackamas, Multnomah, and Washington counties. And Scott Bailey is the regional economist for the Employment Security Department for the state of Washington and covers Clark, Cowlitz, Klickitat, Skamania, and
Wahkiakum.
There you go. Okay, Wahkiakum County. So I will hand it off to them. I will screen share your PowerPoint. And I believe we're starting with Amy.
Okay, thanks, Amy. I don't see anything up there right now. Here we go.
Good.
All right, well, thank you. Yeah, I see it. So yeah, good afternoon. I hope everyone out there who I can't see, you and your families are staying healthy and safe and sane during this crazy time. So I'm going to start out with the most recent traditional labor market data that you and I are all familiar with. It's the unemployment rate and jobs data that we release every month. March data for the Portland metropolitan area was released just 2 hours ago, so very recent in that respect. But before I go there, I have to start with a disclaimer, and that is that the numbers are already outdated. They don't reflect what's been happening in the country, in the state, or in this region over the past 5 or so weeks. And the reason why, is that the timing of the survey is behind. It's the timing of the survey that's behind the numbers that we're releasing today. Can you go forward, Amy? So these are the executive orders that have come down since the beginning of March. And the thing about our job survey is that the reference period is for the survey is based on the 12th of the month. And because most of these public health measures and the subsequent closures happened after the 12th, the March data doesn't capture the vast majority of the hundreds of thousands of people who started filing for unemployment insurance since about the 3rd week in March. Next. So back in the early part of March, we were in the 11th year of an economic expansion and a few months shy of 12. That's the longest, that would have been it is the longest on record. Job growth had been slowing, but it was still respectable. It was still faster than the US, and it was mostly broad-based, spread across many major industries. And most importantly, it was enough to keep the unemployment rate down. Next. So our unemployment rate came in at a record low for March, and this feels ridiculous talking about this right now, but it came in at 3.3% for the state and 3.2% for the Portland area, and these are the lowest rates on record. Now nationally, the dotted black line there, you actually saw the rate go up by almost a full percentage point from its lowest rate in 50 years, 3.5% to 4.4%, as the economy lost about a little over 700,000 jobs. So what's going on here is that a few areas of the country were ahead of Oregon and Portland in seeing the impacts of the virus. California, Texas, Florida, and I think Pennsylvania drove that national rate going higher. These 4 states, I think, were responsible for about half of the increase in the number of people who became unemployed between February and March. About 20 states saw the rates go up by at least a point. Nevada went from 3.6 to 6.3, and Colorado went from 2.5 to 4.5. Oregon was actually one of the 17 states whose rate didn't go up at all. Next. So 1/3 of those 700,000 jobs that were lost nationally were lost in California, Texas, New York, and Pennsylvania. We did see some job losses here in Oregon in March and in the metropolitan area, but they were pretty mild. Oregon lost 4,800 jobs, and the two industries with the largest losses were leisure and hospitality, which includes restaurants and bars, and retail trade. And so these were probably related to C-19. But compared to the nation, these job losses were milder than you would expect based on our size, the size of our economy. So we account for 1.3% of national employment. Our job losses accounted in March, at least, for 0.7% of the nation's total job losses. So in the Portland metro area, we found out today, we released it today, also saw a job loss in March, about 1,400 jobs. So although most of the public health measures took place after the job survey, so we didn't see a ton of job losses, apparently some employers started to pull back before these executive orders took effect. So we are seeing a leading edge of job losses, but not to the extent as many other areas across the country. Next. So the three takeaways from the March, or the few takeaways from the March data, is that, like I just said, March is an early snapshot, both nationally and locally. It's the tip of the iceberg, and it's a hint of things to come. Another takeaway, I think, is that we were in pretty good shape going into this, both locally and nationally, with continued job growth and low unemployment. Another takeaway is that Oregon was not among the first cluster of states impacted by the virus, at least as measured by jobs and joblessness. And finally, we'll have a much, much better idea of what's going on with the jobs and the jobless rate when the April data comes out. And that's going to be in 2 weeks, a little over 2 weeks for the nation, 3 for Oregon, and a month from now for Portland. Next. So while we don't have the traditional labor market statistics right now that to help us get a handle on how bad things are, we do have unemployment insurance claims data that we release weekly. How many people are filing for unemployment, where they live, and what industries they work in. So nationally, 20 million claims have been filed in the last 4 weeks. In Oregon, about 300,000 claims have been filed. For perspective, that's more than all of 2019, all of last year combined. And it's 1/3 of what we saw in the Great Recession. And granted, claims kept pouring in after the recession was technically over, but still, 1 month into this, we've reached levels that took 9 months to reach during the Great Recession. Next. So these 300,000 claims that have been filed, we have detailed information on about 200,000 of them so far. As they become processed, we get more information. And this information includes where these folks live and the industry where they worked. And this is where we can get a clearer picture, a better picture of what's happening. So 80,000 of these 200,000 claims that we have data for have been filed by residents of the Portland area. So we have a little less than half of total statewide processed claims right now. 3 industries account for over half of total claims processed this far. And they're pretty obvious what you expect for the most part. Bars and restaurants were the first and most severely impacted businesses, and hotels are hurting with the travel restrictions. Then you have healthcare and social assistance, elective surgeries, non-urgent care, dental cleaning, eye exams, all those things are on hold right now. Retail trade is making up about 12% of initial claims this far. Shopping malls have closed, clothing stores, shoe stores, furniture stores, and bookstores all have closed. And manufacturers have had sort of like a triple whammy. First, some of them were hit with supply chain issues when C-19 closed factories in China. And then when the virus reached the US, some manufacturers had to close or cut back on production because it's hard or impossible to socially distance on some of their production lines. I have a colleague that covers the North Coast, and he was talking about seafood processing. There's no way, at least the way they were set up, that they can process their product with social distance measures in place. So they're hurting due to social distancing. And then you might have some producers, and maybe more later, pull back due to falling demand from this whole thing. Next. So this is an attempt to look at how the impact of the virus has been working its way through the economy. So 4 weeks into this, at least 4 weeks worth of data that we have right now, restaurants, bars, and hotels, they're all still, they're posting the largest numbers still, but their share of total claims has gone from over half to under a quarter. Now, at the same time, many other industries are obviously seeing an increase. Retail's share of claims has increased. Beyond the big hit they took in that first week of mandated closures, maybe some of the stores that were able to remain open because they're deemed critical have closed or cut more staff. I don't know, it's just a theory, but retail has seen an increase in their share. And then healthcare and social assistance, I think what we might be seeing there is those big announcements by the Oregon Clinic and the Portland Clinic, in addition to other layoffs scattered throughout the area. But those two institutions temporarily laid off over 1,000 workers. And I don't know if these are folks that are claiming unemployment. We don't have that on a firm level basis, but we could be seeing some of that in the numbers. Next. So all industries have been hit. Initial claims in every industry are up over the year, and they're up to an extent that I can't even begin to chart because of scale. But not all have been impacted proportionate to their size. So obviously, the accommodation and food services is a poster child right now, and they account for 3 times as many claims as jobs in the metropolitan area. The industry that we call other services, and this includes hair salons, spas, massage therapists, tattoo parlors, tanning salons, a lot of personal care services. And these are a lot of businesses that were called out directly or indirectly in the executive order. They're just disproportionately impacted. And then arts and recreation and entertainment, that industry has also seen more claims relative to its size. I mean, that's full of businesses that depend on crowds. So those obviously have shut down for now. And at the other end of the spectrum, professional and technical services, these include accounting firms and engineering firms, legal firms. These guys have half as many claims relative to their size right now. Company headquarters and banks and certain sectors of government also have fewer claims relative to their size. And next, please. This no doubt has a lot to do with the ability to work from home. We don't have local data on this, but if we did, I'm sure the trends would be very similar. But nationally, over half the workforce in financial activities, professional and business services, which include the management of companies and the professional and technical folks, and the information sector, over half of those workforce, either have worked from home, either full-time or part-time nationally. Next. So another way to look at the data, which shows, I mean, thus far, the economic, the shrapnel from this whole thing has really hit the low wage earners the most. Retail salespeople, cashiers, waiters and waitresses, cooks, all those folks are out of work, or many of those folks are. And a lot of these jobs are part-time and they don't pay a lot. And I imagine that a lot of the people who work in these jobs work more than one job to make ends meet. And we don't know the wages of the people who are filing for unemployment. We do, but I can't pull it. I don't know how, but we don't know how. But we do know the average wage of the industries where they worked. And you can see the claimants are highly concentrated in low-wage industries. And again, that makes sense given how restaurants and retail are dominating the claims data. Next. And then finally, looking across the state, this is a little back of the napkin kind of thing, but what I did is I took the number of people who were employed right before this whole thing started, so the first quarter of this year, and then I looked at the number of unemployment insurance claims that have been filed since the middle of March. And so what I found out is that 8.4 claims have been filed for unemployment insurance for every 100 restaurants who are, every 100 residents who are employed right before or right as the lights went out. And that number is twice as high in coastal communities and other areas of the state that are more dependent on tourism. Next. So this is the million-dollar question. What's going to happen? What's the outlook? When will we pull out of this? How long will it take? No one knows. It depends on the virus. You know, we can't forecast the duration of this downturn, which we're still in the middle of, let alone the recovery, because it all depends on public health outcomes. When will there be an effective treatment? When will there be a vaccine? We just don't know. In the short term, if you want some more gloom and doom, the St. Louis Fed says nationally that job losses could reach 47 million, with the unemployment rate skyrocketing to 32% in the second quarter of this year. And if Oregon acts proportionately to our size and these job loss estimates, that's 600,000 jobs. But then they go on to say that it's the duration of unemployment matters more than these huge numbers. And again, it's just a big unknown. So that's what I have.
Great, thank you so much, Amy. Well, now we'll pivot over to Scott. Also, I should say real quickly that these slides will be disseminated to all of you after the meeting.
Okay, thanks both Amy's. Amy V, you did a great job of summarizing some of the issues, so I won't go over all of those. There's a lot of similarities really all over about some of the data challenges right now. So what I want to do first is focus on a little bit on the national scene. Well, first of all, so next slide. I just want to say this is a very serious time, but I need humor to get through this. These are my 6 bullet point forecasts I gave in January. And you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, I was 2 out of 6 correct. Which in baseball would be great, but as an economist, I don't know. So next slide. So let's talk about a little bit about the national economy. Again, it's great putting up a slide that's supposed to be funny and nobody's laughing. Nationally, there's 5 statistics that the economists focus on to determine, to make the recession call. One of those is GDP, and we won't get first quarter GDP for another, I think it'll be out at the end of the month. But the 4 others, next slide, are personal income, non-farm employment, industrial production, and retail sales. Personal income hasn't come out yet for March, so that's still looking good. You can see a small dip in that non-farm employment line, and that's just again, the tip of the iceberg, going back to our Titanic metaphor. And you see plunges in industrial production and retail sales. So I put all of this data into, I have a very sophisticated economic model that I've been working on for years. And I got the output from that model to measure the impact, and I'm going to show it on the next slide. And there you go. So before going into the Clark County specific data on claims, I wanted to go through quickly, and this dates back to the original purpose of what this presentation was going to be. It was to be a look at the Clark County economy because I know I've lived in Portland all my life. Before I took the job in Vancouver, I'd been to Vancouver like 3 times. Um, so I just wanted to go over some highlights and set the context of Clark County and the Portland metro area. So next slide has just summary stats. So population-wise, Clark is a bit larger than Clackamas County, same with jobs. It's got a pretty high median household income and a low poverty rate, except compared with Clackamas. And I don't know about some of you, but I kind of question that Clackamas rate, but that's another topic. Next slide. A lot of Clark County, roughly a third, works over in Portland. So that's that top line shows that about a third of earned income in Clark County comes from jobs outside the county, mostly in Portland. And that bottom line is people like me who live in Portland and work in Clark County. That's money flowing back to Oregon mostly again. You notice that line has been going down over time. That's because, you know, working for the state, wages are not that great. Moving right along. Okay, next slide. Clark County had a really strong recovery. So that's the top line. Had about 25% job growth compared to the peak before Great Recession started. Much faster than the states or the Portland area overall. Next slide. I want to highlight where some of that job growth was. Construction, faster than average. Finance, much faster than average. One of our local, they're actually based in San Francisco, but they've done most of their growth out in Camas. Fisher Investments, very high salaries. That's contributed a lot to that boost in median household income and wages overall. Lots of job growth in healthcare, that's true all over. And then there's also corporate offices, huge growth rate there. You might remember when Banfield Pet Hospitals moved across the river from Portland to Vancouver. Peace Health moved its corporate offices there. So it's really been a change over the last 10 years where we've seen much higher growth in professional managerial jobs than Vancouver was known for previously. The other game changer going on, next slide, is the construction on the waterfront. So a couple hotels going up. We'll see how those turn out. Condo towers, apartments, office space, restaurants. If you haven't been there, go and check it out. You see the pier sticking out over the river. It's a very cool thing. So lots of development going on there that's really changing the nature and will for years to come change the nature of downtown Vancouver. A side note, back in 2009, I chaired an economics conference in Vancouver. It was the Pacific Northwest Regional Economics Conference. And, you know, when the day was done, workshops were over, it's like, okay, what are we going to do now for fun? And there really wasn't anything to do in Vancouver. I chaired the same conference 4 years later. There was a brew pub right across the street, good restaurants, blocks away. So that even more so is happening in what was really a blighted area when I first started working there 30 years ago. Next couple of slides real quickly. We've had really strong growth in retail sales. Again, that's come to an end. And next slide, 2019 was a huge year for housing construction, especially multifamily. I'm going to skip over the next couple of slides just to say within some pretty strong growth in incomes, there's still huge inequity problems. So you see half of our renters are cost burdened and almost a quarter or more than half their income is going to housing. Next slide, incomes have gone up. Next slide. Poverty really hasn't changed over the last 4 or 5 years, despite, you know, really good job and wage growth. Next slide. If you tease out wages, yeah, that growth in income in the bottom 20% of households has been minuscule. $1,400 a year. Divide that by 12. That's $120 a month. Look at the increase in rent over that time, and it's eaten all that up and more. Next slide looks at earnings by race, and there's been absolutely no change, if you want to call that the wage gap by race, no change over 10, 20, 30-year period. So moving along, next slide shows relative unemployment rates, and like Amy said, still low in March. Next slide shows relative over-the-year job growth, again, still pretty good in March for Clark County, but watch, you know, that's all gonna cave next month. Okay, so next slide moves into our claims data, and this is similar to what Amy had. So roughly, if you do that back of the envelope claims as a percent of, I used labor force, she used resident employment, pretty much the same type of measure. Clark was about the state average, a little under the state average, so the claims were roughly 10% of our labor force. And again, in normal times, only about a third of the unemployed are filing a claim. There's also re-entrants, new entrants, people who it just wasn't worth their time or their money. They wouldn't get enough back in a UI claim, or they quit. So this is just this isn't all of the unemployed. The claims don't represent that change in unemployment, isn't fully represented by claims. Next slide, claims by industry. Pretty similar in terms of, and Amy covered that well, the food services, construction, retail trade, healthcare with all the clinics closing, that's mostly outpatient. If you look at the occupation side, you see dental hygienists, dental assistants. And then we have a lot of interstate claims from people who live in Clark County, but who most of their earnings was probably in Portland. And we don't get the industry for those folks. Next slide shows the breakout by occupation. Again, a pretty similar story in terms of food prep, construction trades, sales, but also a lot in management occupations. Those are largely sales managers, marketing managers, construction managers, restaurant managers as well. That was, I think, the one surprise in the data. I hadn't quite thought that one through to see how many on the management side would be laid off. And then some demographics. We're still mostly female. Next slide. I looked at, compared claims by race with our population and labor force estimates by race, and they were really pretty close. So the disproportionality that I think probably shows up in other areas, and again, Clark County isn't the most diverse county around. I think there's probably going to be more disparities that show up in other areas. If you look at by age, it's disproportionately young. So that under 25 is roughly 20% of claims, but only 13% of the labor force back in 2018. and the same with 45 and older are underrepresented in claimants compared to their share of the labor force. If you look at next slide is education. Same thing. High school diploma holders were 33% of claimants, but roughly 20% of the adult population in 2018, while bachelor's and higher were underrepresented in claims compared to their share of adult population. I think you skipped, I thought there was, did we? Is that everybody? Okay, that's everybody. So that's what we have so far. I won't do this, but I was going to play a little movie right now to talk about the road to recession or to show it, but it's just back to Wile E. Coyote, and we'll just leave it at that there.